There are books that entertain, there are books that teach, and then there are books that terrify, the powerful books so dangerous, so mysterious, that they are hidden away for centuries, buried beneath layers of silence and fire. This is the story of one such book, a text so ancient that it predates Moses, so explosive that religious leaders once banned it from the Bible, so prophetic that it foretold the rise of demons, the coming of the Messiah, and the end of the world. This is the Book of Enoch. It vanished for over 500 years. Whispers of it haunted the shadows of history. Scholars denied it. Priests feared it, even when fragments were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Its full truth remained veiled. Why was it removed? What secrets does it hold? And perhaps most chilling of all, why does it speak of angels who fell from heaven, took human wives, and fathered monsters that once ruled the earth? Before we reveal what was hidden for millennia, let's pause for a moment. If you're drawn in already, if the mystery in the title makes your heart race just a little, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the revelations ahead. Comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. We want to know who's hearing this ancient voice right now, across the world. And if the story so far intrigues you, share this video, especially with someone you think might understand the mystery in the title. Because it's more than a title. It's a warning. The Book of Enoch begins in a world already in decline, a world on the edge of catastrophe. It tells us that before the flood, before Noah, before the collapse of the ancient world, something unnatural happened. Heavenly beings, the Watchers, looked down upon the earth and desired what was not theirs. They descended, not to help mankind, but to possess it. They took women as wives. They taught forbidden knowledge. And from these unions came giants, Nephilim creatures that devoured the world. But the Book of Enoch is not a fantasy. It is a prophetic document, filled with visions given to a man who walked so closely with God that he was taken alive into heaven. Enoch did not die. He was removed, because what he saw could not remain in the world unchanged. His writings, long concealed, tell us what was happening in the unseen realm, while mankind lived, loved, and sinned on the surface. A war was raging above and below, and Enoch was its witness. This book is not easy to read, not because of its language, but because of its implications. It challenges everything. It redefines the origin of evil. It explains the presence of unclean spirits. It shows us that the flood was not just about human sin, but a cosmic rebellion that had infected the very structure of creation. What you're about to hear is not a story. It is a testimony. Every chapter of this series will walk you deeper into a mystery that has been kept from you, perhaps intentionally. You will learn what angels fear, what demons hide, and why this book, above almost any other, was buried. But now, it rises again, and it begins with the descent of the Watchers in the vast lineage of early humanity, surrounded by names forgotten and lives blurred by time. One figure stands in quiet defiance of obscurity. Enoch, a man whose story is wrapped in mystery, whose name appears briefly in the book of Genesis, just a few lines, and yet those lines contain a truth so extraordinary, it reverberates through Scripture like a quiet thunder. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He was not dead, not buried, not returned to dust like the others. He simply vanished, taken, not by illness or war or old age, but by the hand of God himself. Why? Why would God remove a man from the earth without allowing death to claim him? That question, unanswered by Genesis, is fully explored in the book that bears his name. To understand Enoch, one must go back to the first breaths of creation. Enoch was born into a generation still echoing with the memory of Eden. His great-grandfather was Adam, the first man, the one who walked in the garden of God and lived beneath the light of his face. But paradise had long since closed its gates. The children of Cain had built cities of blood and rebellion. They carved idols, sang songs to false gods, and gloried in the works of their own hands. Violence became law, and pride became worship. Yet from the line of Seth, Adam's faithful son, there remained a flicker of remembrance, a remnant of people who still prayed, still hoped, still honored the name of the Creator. Enoch was born into that line. But even among the remnant, he was different. While others tended flocks or tilled soil, Enoch sat in solitude. He would climb hills at dusk to watch the stars and whisper prayers into the silence. He studied not the ways of men, but the patterns of the heavens. His heart burned with a singular hunger, not for knowledge, not for power, but to know God. He did not wait for divine encounters. He sought them, and heaven, in turn, opened its ear. For 300 years, Enoch walked with God, not metaphorically, not occasionally, but in a living rhythm of communion. Every day was prayer, every night was worship. His life became a melody rising through the smoke of sacrifice, a song only God could fully hear. But as Enoch drew closer to the divine, he also began to see the truth hidden beneath the surface of the world. He saw that earth was not only corrupted by human sin, but influenced by something far older, far more dangerous. He discerned the shadows of a celestial rebellion, a slow and quiet rot spreading among the angels. He sensed that mankind was being watched not only by God, but by beings whose intentions were no longer holy. It was then that God spoke directly to Enoch, not in a dream, not in a whisper, but in unmistakable clarity. Enoch, I have chosen you. You will witness what no mortal has seen. You will write what no other man dares write. Your words will endure until the end of the age. One stutum. From that moment, Enoch's purpose was no longer his own. He became the scribe of righteousness, the one through whom heaven would record its warnings, judgments, and promises. Angels descended to instruct him. He was shown the vast machinery of the universe, the layers of the heavens, the paths of the stars, the names of the winds, and the terrible fate of those who had fallen from the presence of God. He saw the giants born of forbidden unions, the corruption of human hearts by celestial secrets, and the flood that would one day wash it all away. And he wrote it all down. Every vision, every voice, every divine decree was inscribed for future generations for us. The Book of Enoch is not folklore. It is a divine archive, a celestial testimony, both beautiful and terrifying in its clarity. It unveils the origin of demons, the punishment of angels, and the sorrow of a creator watching his world spiral into madness. And yet, woven throughout its thunder is a thread of golden light, a prophecy of redemption. For Enoch did not only see judgment, he saw hope. He saw the Son of Man seated beside the Ancient of Days. He saw a future Redeemer who would restore all things. Long before the prophets of Israel, long before the birth in Bethlehem, Enoch saw the Messiah and wept. Before he vanished from the earth, Enoch gathered his family. He took his son, Methuselah, the longest living man in history, and placed the scrolls into his hands. "These are not my words," he said. "They are the words of the Most High. Keep them, guard them, for one day the world will forget, and they will need to remember." And then, one morning, Enoch rose before the sun, as he always did, and walked out into the hills. But this time, he did not return. The sky opened, Light poured down like a waterfall of fire, and Enoch was taken alive into the realms of heaven. His body was never found. Only his writings remained. These writings were cherished by the early followers of God. They were read in synagogues, passed through generations, and even quoted by apostles. Jude, the brother of Jesus, directly references Enoch's prophecy, declaring its truth and calling him the seventh from Adam. For a time, Enoch's voice was honored, but as religious power consolidated and doctrines were systematized, his visions became too dangerous. The church found the Book of Enoch too detailed, too direct, too wild to be controlled. It spoke of angelic sins, heavenly realms, and knowledge that challenged the neat borders of orthodoxy. And so it was cast aside, but not everywhere. In the mountains of Ethiopia, the book endured. Monks preserved it in the Ge'ez language, copying it by hand, generation after generation. In their faithfulness, the book remained whole and untouched, as Enoch had written it. And when scholars rediscovered it in the 18th century, and confirmed it again with the Dead Sea Scrolls in the 20th, the truth could no longer be denied. The Book of Enoch had survived, and its voice, once silenced, now speaks again. Enoch's life is more than a mystery. It is a blueprint, a man who lived not for this world, but for the one to come. A man who chose obedience when rebellion reigned. A man who walked so closely with God that death could not hold him. His legacy is not just the visions he left behind, but the example he set for those willing to listen. In a time of noise and corruption, Enoch walked in silence and truth, and for that, God lifted him from the dust and placed him among the stars. Before the flood, before fire fell from heaven or tablets were carved in stone, the greatest rebellion in the history of the cosmos began. Not on earth, but in heaven. It was not a rebellion of swords and blood, but of longing, of angels who watched the world too closely. They were called the Watchers, 200 in number, chosen from among the highest ranks of heaven to observe mankind. Their role was simple: to guard, to guide from a distance, to remind humanity of the Creator's path. They were meant to be sentinels, not participants, yet over time, their eyes lingered too long. They watched as men and women built families, tended fields, danced beneath the stars. They heard songs sung around fires, saw hands clasped in love, witnessed mothers cradle newborns, and slowly, something awakened within them, something forbidden. They began to desire what they were never meant to possess. The beauty of human women stirred in them a yearning they had never known. At first, they resisted. The boundary between heaven and earth was absolute. But temptation, when left unchecked, becomes hunger, and hunger becomes rebellion. One angle, Samyaza mighty, second only to the archangels, voiced what the others had dared only to think. He desired to take a human wife. The others stood in silence, their wings heavy with conflict. Then, one by one, they confessed the same longing, but Samyaza warned them, "If I descend alone, I will bear the full judgment. But if we descend together, we will share the fate." And so, they made a pact, an unbreakable oath, sealed beneath the stars atop a great mountain that would one day be called Hermon. Its name means curse, and it earned that name that night. On the slopes of Mount Hermon, the 200 angels stood in a circle. Each placed his hand upon the shoulder of the one beside him. Together they spoke the words that would shatter the order of heaven. "We bind ourselves by mutual curses. We will not turn back from this plan. We will descend to earth. We will take wives from among the daughters of men. And whatever may come, we will face it together." In that moment, the cosmos shifted. The line between divine and mortal was crossed. The stars above grew dim, and the angels fell. But this was no fall like Lucifer's born of pride and war. This was different. A fall born of desire, of longing to possess beauty that was not theirs to hold. They descended not in wrath, but in wonder, like stars slipping from the sky. When they landed, they were no longer entirely angels, and they were no longer fit for heaven. The earth trembled under their feet, and the daughters of men looked upon them and were captivated. These were no ordinary men, they shone, tall and flawless, voices echoing with the timbre of eternity. The women did not resist. They took wives, hundreds of them, and with them they conceived something the world had never seen before. The Nephilim, giants, born of heaven and earth, but belonging fully to neither. Their height was monstrous. Some reached 30 feet tall. Their strength was beyond reckoning. One could tear a tree from the ground. Another could crush stone in his hand. At first, humanity worshipped them. Surely these were gods, or sons of gods. They hoped the Nephilim would protect them, would lead them. But they were wrong. The Nephilim were not protectors. They were destroyers. Their appetites were insatiable. They devoured entire harvests. They slaughtered herds of livestock. When there was no food left, they turned on the people themselves. The Book of Enoch says they began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, and then against one another. They drank blood. They consumed flesh. Their violence had no limit. What was once a garden had become a grave, and the watchers, their fathers, stood by, powerless to stop the horror they had unleashed. Some of the watchers wept, others turned away, but their oath had bound them to this fate. They had shattered the order of creation. Samyaza, standing amidst the ruin, whispered, "What have we done?" But the skies were silent. No answer came, only the screams of those dying below. The mountain where they had sworn their oath, once a place of stars and beauty, was now a cursed altar, a wound in the fabric of the world. But their corruption did not end with their children. The Watchers also brought forbidden knowledge, secrets meant only for heaven. They taught mankind how to forge swords and armor, how to adorn the body with cosmetics and jewelry, how to enchant with herbs, how to summon spirits. They revealed the movement of stars, not for worship, but for power. Magic entered the world. Vanity flourished. War became craft, and truth became twisted. What began as a single whisper of longing became a storm. The Watchers had not only defiled themselves, they had changed the course of humanity. The hearts of men, once dimly aware of the divine, now turned completely inward. The world groaned beneath the weight of blood and fire. The angels in heaven, faithful and unfallen, watched with sorrow, and then they rose. They carried the report to the throne of the Almighty. The time for judgment had come, but the story of the Watchers was not yet done, for their knowledge still spread, their children still ruled, and their curse still festered. Soon, God would act, but before the judgment came, the sins of the Watchers would reach even deeper. They had opened a door, and what had entered would not leave easily. When the Watchers took human wives, the earth itself shifted beneath their feet. From this unholy union, monstrous offspring were born, creatures unlike anything that had walked the land before. They were the Nephilim, whose name means fallen ones. Their very existence defied nature. They were not fully angel, not fully human, but something between. Their mothers bore them in agony. These were not ordinary children. Their births brought tremors. The air thickened, the sky dimmed, and when they emerged, they were already the size of full-grown men. Within months, they towered over the tallest trees. Within years, they became forces of destruction. The Book of Enoch records that they stood 30 feet tall or more. But it was not their height alone that made them terrifying. It was their hunger. One could consume a village's grain in a single sitting. Another would devour entire herds and still cry for more. They stripped the land of resources with monstrous speed. Fields turned barren. Rivers dried. Forests vanished beneath their feet. And when the food ran out, they did not hesitate. They turned on mankind. At first, the people tried to appease them. Tribes offered tribute, grain, animals, even their own children, in hopes of survival. But the Nephilim were insatiable. The more they received, the more they demanded. Villages were emptied. Fathers watched their sons dragged away. Mothers hid their infants in caves, praying the giants would not find them. But nothing could hide from the eyes of the Nephilim. They hunted by scent, by sound, by the trembling of the earth beneath a fleeing foot. They were gods of death, and worse, they delighted in it. The land once filled with laughter and music now echoed with screams. Bones littered the earth. Smoke rose from towns reduced to rubble. The Book of Enoch spares no horror. The Nephilim sinned against all life birds, beasts, reptiles, fish, and then against one another. They drank blood, tore flesh, devoured each other. The giants that had once seemed divine now revealed themselves as beasts in the truest sense. Their rage was relentless, their cruelty boundless. They ruled by terror, and under their shadow, the human race shrank in number and in spirit. What made the Nephilim more terrible than even their size or strength was their awareness. They were not mindless monsters. They spoke. They reasoned. Some even mocked their victims. They knew they were not of this world, and they despised the world for it. In their hearts burned a bitter knowledge. They were born of sin, and there was no place for them among angels or men. That hatred festered into destruction. It was not enough for them to consume. They needed to desecrate. They tore down sacred altars. They defiled holy places. And wherever they went, they left only ruin. Yet the watchers did not stop them. Some even reveled in their children's power. Others wept but remained paralyzed by the weight of their own choices. They had chosen this path, and now they could not escape its consequences. One of the watchers, Azil, turned his despair into a new form of corruption. He began to teach mankind the secrets of war. Until then, men had fought with fists and sticks. Now they forged blades, crafted shields, built weapons meant not just to survive but to kill. Enoch writes that Azil taught men to shape iron, to sharpen it into spears and daggers, to strike from afar and slay with precision. War, once rare and primitive, now became an art. Tribes turned on one another with steel in their hands and vengeance in their hearts. What had once been survival became conquest. What had once been dispute became slaughter. And all the while, the Nephilim watched and laughed. For now, even mankind had learned to destroy itself. But Azil was not done. He turned to the women and gave them knowledge meant only for angels. He showed them how to paint their faces with minerals, how to fashion gemstones into ornaments, how to enchant with beauty. Vanity took root. Modesty died. Attraction became manipulation. Love became possession. Enoch records that Azil taught the art of beautifying the eyelids and crafting adornments from every precious stone. This knowledge, once sacred, was now used to seduce, to deceive, to control, and humanity, eager for power, embraced it without question. Other watchers followed Azil's lead. Samyaza revealed the secrets of sorcery, how to call upon spirits, how to bend nature to one's will. Another taught astrology not to glorify God, but to predict fate and control time. Still another taught enchantments and root-cutting, all of it, every forbidden teaching, poured from the mouths of fallen angels into the ears of men. And humanity, drunk on knowledge, forgot the one who gave it life. Violence spread like wildfire. Magic corrupted the heart. Pride grew into idolatry. The Nephilim ruled with cruelty, and the people below them mimicked their masters. The earth, once a reflection of Eden, became a twisted mirror of heaven's rebellion. Enoch, watching all of this, understood that the disease of the watchers had not ended with their sin. It had become a plague infecting every living soul. And still, God did not act yet. But heaven was not blind. The cries of the oppressed reached beyond the clouds. The blood of the innocent stained the soil. The angels who had remained loyal looked down with grief. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, 4 mighty archangels, stood before the throne and cried out, "How long, O Lord?" And at last, God answered. Judgment was coming, but before the flood, before the chains were forged, before the demons rose, the full horror of the Nephilim had to be revealed, for only then would the justice of God be understood. After the watchers descended and the Nephilim spread across the land like a plague of ruin, the world changed not only in blood and bone, but in knowledge. It was not just the monstrous giants that tore creation apart, it was the invisible poison of forbidden teachings, whispered into the ears of humanity by angels who had once stood in the presence of the Most High. These were not tricks or primitive spells, they were celestial secrets. Divine mechanisms meant for angels alone, now handed recklessly to mortals who had neither the wisdom nor the purity to bear them. Chief among the corruptors was Azil, once named God Strengthens. Now, he would be remembered as the one who weakened the world's connection to its creator. He did not fall with violence. He fell with gifts deceptive, beautiful, deadly. He taught mankind the secrets of metallurgy, the art of shaping the earth's veins into weapons. Before Azil, men fought with stones, with fists, with anger restrained by the limits of flesh. After Azil, they forged blades that split bone, spears that flew from afar, armor that turned away justice. Violence became an industry, and war became a language everyone spoke. But Azil's most devastating lesson was not in battle. It was in vanity. He turned to the daughters of men and taught them how to adorn themselves not with the light of purity, but with paints, jewels, and mirrors. He ground minerals into pigments, showed them how to darken the eyes, color the lips, craft bracelets and earrings to catch the attention of wandering glances. Beauty, once a reflection of divine design, became a weapon. The heart was no longer seen, only the face, and women, once revered as life-bearers and nurturers, became objects in the hands of those who had forgotten God. The Book of Enoch tells us that Azil taught both men and women arts meant for glory and truth, twisted now for lust and domination. The line between sacred and profane blurred until no one remembered where it once stood. Love turned to control. Desire turned to greed. The world had not just changed, it had been reprogrammed. Samyaza, leader of the Watchers, added another layer of corruption. He taught enchantments and root-cutting, the secrets of herbs and the rhythm of words that summoned spirits from beyond the veil. Sorcery entered the world, not healing or help, but control and illusion. Men learned how to cloud the minds of others, to bind wills with cursed symbols, to open gateways they could never close. Spirits responded to their calls, but they were not holy. They were shadows, eager to whisper lies in exchange for obedience. And the Watchers watched with silent satisfaction as mankind lost its fear of heaven. Other fallen angels joined the flood. Armoros taught how to break spells, not to defend the weak, but to compete in power. Barachiel taught astrology not as a means to marvel at creation, but to manipulate fate. The stars, once songs of glory, became tools for greed. Humanity believed the stars ruled their lives, and in doing so, they stopped listening to the one who had set the stars in place. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun, Sariel the course of the moon. Each new teaching was a wonder corrupted. The seasons were no longer sacred, they were charts for war, signs for conquest. Knowledge multiplied, but wisdom vanished. Mankind grew clever, but not holy. They spoke of destiny, not righteousness. They trusted signs, not prayer. The earth groaned beneath this weight. For every secret taught, a piece of innocence was lost. What had once been a creation of light now teetered on the edge of shadow. And as more angels fell into this pattern, the balance between heaven and earth fractured. Temples were built, but not for God. Altars were raised, but not in gratitude. The children of men bowed to the stars, to the spirits, to the giants who ruled them in terror, and the watchers, who had once sworn to protect humanity, now stood over it like kings. What made the teachings so dangerous was not that they were lies. They were truth. Truth, unguarded. Truth without reverence. In the hands of the unrighteous, even truth becomes a weapon. And so it was. Music became seduction. Potions became poison. Signs became superstition. And above all, mankind forgot how to worship. The most tragic part of the Watchers' fall was this: their gifts were once divine. Their knowledge had been meant to serve heaven, in another world, in another time. Those same teachings could have helped humanity flourish in purity. But once severed from God, knowledge became cancer, growth became greed, and every new revelation pushed the world further from its creator. The cries of the innocent multiplied. Men killed not for survival, but for pride. Women adorned themselves not for love, but for power. Kings sacrificed their own children to please spirits they did not understand. And in the shadows, the fallen angels watched, their eyes dim, their wings stained by their choice. They had wanted to taste the beauty of earth. Now they tasted its ruin. Enoch saw it all. He recorded it not as a historian, but as a witness, a prophet whose pen burned with sorrow and urgency. His words do not merely describe a fall. They warn of what happens when divine order is cast aside for personal desire. The Watchers were not monsters. They were once holy, and that is what makes their descent so terrifying. Heaven watched in silence, but only for a moment. The four great archangels had seen enough. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, guardians of the throne, stood before the presence of the Almighty. And they spoke not only on behalf of heaven, but on behalf of earth. "How long, O Lord?" they cried. "How long will you allow the corruption to continue? The Nephilim devour your children. The Watchers twist your creation, and the cries of the faithful are drowned in the blood of the innocent." Mega and God, who is slow to anger but perfect in justice, answered, "It is enough." 8. The Watchers would be judged. The giants would fall. The earth would be cleansed. But first, a man must be called, a man who still walked in purity, a man who still spoke with God. That man was Enoch, and the time had come for him to deliver heaven's decree to those who had once stood in heaven's courts. There comes a moment in every tale of rebellion when the silence breaks, when the wounds inflicted on the innocent can no longer be ignored, when the very fabric of creation screams for justice. That moment had come. The world groaned beneath the weight of sin. The skies darkened not just from clouds, but from the absence of divine favor. The seas churned, the ground cracked, and the voices of the suffering men, women, children rose like incense of grief to the throne of the Almighty. The Book of Enoch tells us that the earth itself laid accusation against the lawless ones. The earth, once blessed and called good, was now a witness to corruption so vile that it could not remain silent. This was no poetic metaphor. It was a spiritual reality. The ground, soaked in innocent blood, became a testimony. The rivers, clogged with the ashes of burnt offerings made to false gods, carried the sorrows of the oppressed. The sky, once a canopy of peace, now echoed with thunder not born of weather, but of divine unease. Creation itself had been inverted. What was made for harmony had become a stage for horror, and in that chaos, 4 figures rose from the depths of heavenly glory to bring the report before the Creator himself. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, archangels of power and purity, stood at the foot of the throne. They did not weep, for their sorrow was too deep for tears. They spoke not with trembling, but with purpose. Michael stepped forward first. His name means, "Who is like God?" And with that name came authority. "Lord of hosts," he said, "you see what has been done. Azil, your servant, has betrayed his post. He has taught bloodshed. He has given secrets of war to men who were not meant to wield such power. Because of him, the earth runs red." Is the days of 240s. Gabriel followed, his voice carrying the cadence of a trumpet before battle. The souls of the murdered cry out. The innocent are slain. The children are torn from the arms of their mothers. They plead for justice, and they ask, "How long will our blood remain unavenged?" There was no rage in his words, only unbearable truth. Truth, sharp as any blade, forged by the fallen. Raphael, the healer, spoke next. His voice was gentle, yet filled with urgency. The spirits of men are being destroyed, the minds of women corrupted. The earth itself withers beneath their feet. The balance you established is broken. If this continues, there will be nothing left to heal. Then Telly stood 2:7. Then came Uriel, the light of God, the revealer of mysteries. His gaze pierced through time, through darkness, through all that was hidden. The darkness has grown so deep that even the righteous can barely see. Temples lie in ruin. The stars are used to deceive. The voices of the faithful are few. If you do not act, Lord, the light will vanish forever. Hell, a silence fell, but it was not the peace of stillness. It was the stillness before thunder, the silence of a decision being weighed, measured, made. The throne of God, radiant and infinite, did not tremble. It did not waver. And then the voice came not in fury, but in absolute resolve. "Hear me, my faithful ones. The time has come. I will not allow this corruption to continue." The command of God is not like the command of kings. It does not echo. It transforms. When he speaks, the very laws of nature bend to his word. The watchers will be bound. God said, "The Nephilim will be destroyed. The earth will be cleansed." The decree was final. Judgment had begun, but justice does not descend in wrath alone. It comes with order. It comes with instruction. Each angel was given a task, and none questioned their role. To Uriel, the Lord said, "Go to Noah, son of Lamech. Warn him, instruct him to build an ark. A flood is coming, not of politics, not of war, but of water. It will cover the earth, and only those within the vessel will be saved." Without hesitation, Uriel vanished in light. To Raphael, the healer turned judge, God gave a darker mission. Go to Azil, bind him, cast him into the desert of Dudail, cover him with jagged stones. He is to remain there until the day of judgment, when he will be thrown into fire. Raphael's face did not change, but his sorrow was visible. He bowed and departed. To Gabriel, the Lord gave the sword of division. Go to the Nephilim. Set them against each other. Let them destroy themselves in battle. They were born of violence. By violence they shall fall. Gabriel's wings spread in a blaze of holy fire. He descended like a comet toward the earth. Finally, to Michael, commander of heavenly hosts, God gave the most solemn charge. Go to Samyaza and all who descended with him. Bind them, bury them beneath the earth. For 70 generations they shall remain in darkness until their judgment. Then they will be cast into the abyss of fire. Michael bowed deeply. It will be done. Lord, the sky over earth changed that day. Something shifted in the winds, in the waters, in the very breath of the world. Those who walked with God felt it. The Nephilim sensed it, though they could not name it. The watchers, scattered across the land, paused in their corruptions. They knew their time had ended. Uriel appeared to Noah as he worked his vineyard. The old man fell to his knees, for the presence of the angel was unbearable in its brightness. Do not be afraid, Uriel said. You have found favor with the Lord. A great flood is coming. Build an ark. Bring your family, for everything else will be swept away. And Noah obeyed not with debate, not with delay. He listened, and he acted. Faith is not in feeling, it is in obedience. Meanwhile, Raphael descended into the wastelands where Azil stood watching men fight with the very swords he had taught them to forge. Raphael, Azil said, half laughing, half trembling, have you come to gloat? No, the angel replied. I have come to bind you. Invisible chains wrapped around Azil, forged not of iron but of judgment itself. He fell to his knees. You will be cast into darkness, Raphael said, and you will remain there until the day you are thrown into fire. Mace, Gabriel passed over the camps of the giants. He did not strike them. He whispered into their minds. Seeds of pride, seeds of suspicion. The Nephilim, already poisoned by hate, turned on one another, brother against brother, mountain against mountain. Their screams shook the sky. Their blood turned rivers red, and Michael, brightest, fiercest, descended upon the watchers gathered at their cursed mountain. Samyaza stepped forward, no longer proud, only weary. Will you bind us? Michael, he asked. We who were once your brothers? Michael looked at them without anger, only sorrow. You broke the sacred law. You defiled the earth. Now you will be bound. Chains of light fell upon them. The mountain opened, and they were swallowed into the earth. In heaven, the 4 angels returned to the throne. It is done, they said, and the Lord looked upon the earth once more. The watchers were silenced. The Nephilim had begun to fall, and Noah was building the ark. The end was coming, but not in chaos, in justice. Judgment does not always arrive with a roar. Sometimes it begins with a whisper from heaven and a crack in the earth. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like the first drop of rain before the storm. But when the Lord of hosts decrees that the reckoning shall come, nothing in heaven or on earth can delay it. The watchers had made their oath. They had crossed the line that must never be crossed. Their children, the Nephilim, had turned the world into a playground of violence and blasphemy. The teachings they had scattered like seeds now grew into forests of ruin. The time for warnings had passed. The time for mercy had ended. Now the sword of heaven would fall. The archangels moved swiftly. They did not debate. They did not hesitate. They moved with the weight of divine justice behind them, and the authority of the Almighty in every word. Michael, clothed in light brighter than fire, descended once more to Mount Hermon, the very place where the Watchers had sealed their rebellion. It was fitting that their punishment begin where their sin had. The mountain, once mist-covered and sacred, now trembled beneath his feet. Lightning split the sky. The air thickened with holy presence, scattered across the earth. The Watchers felt the pull of judgment before they saw its form. Some ran, some wept, some fell to their knees, knowing what was to come. Others remained defiant, clinging to the last shreds of their pride. But all would face the same fate. Michael's voice echoed through the valleys. Samyaza, Azil, Armaros, Barakil, all you who left your posts and defiled the daughters of men, your time is over. To Elf, chains descended from the heavens, not of iron, not of any earthly material, but made from pure authority, forged in righteousness, unbreakable, incorruptible. Each link was a sentence, each ring a verdict. These were not punishments delivered in rage, but in justice that had waited long enough. The Watchers, once radiant beings who stood in the courts of God, now found themselves bound, trembling under the weight of their own choices. Samyaza, their leader, stepped forward, his wings, it once luminous, now dulled with shadow. "We did not mean for this," he said, his voice broken. "We only wanted what was beautiful." Michael did not speak with anger. "You were given beauty beyond imagining. You stood in the presence of the Holy One, and you traded it for dust." The chains wrapped around Samyaza, and he fell to the ground in silence. As each Watcher was bound, the earth itself responded. The mountain cracked, the ground opened. A chasm, deep and dark, yawned beneath them. The Book of Enoch describes this moment as the earth swallowing the guilty, sealing them beneath for 70 generations. These angels, once robed in light, now descended into darkness. They would not see the sky again until the day of final judgment. And even then, it would not be for mercy. Raphael, meanwhile, completed his task in the wilderness of Dudael. There, far from any city, among sharp rocks and barren land, he found Azil, the angel who had taught men to kill and women to seduce. Azil did not speak when he saw the archangel. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he knew this was the price for what he had done. Raphael raised his hand, and the chains bound Azil. The angel was thrown into a pit, and jagged stones rained upon him, covering his face. "Let him not see light again," came the command. And so it was. Azil screamed, but no ear would ever hear him again. Gabriel's work was different. He did not bind. He did not bury. He whispered. Into the hearts of the Nephilim, he sowed suspicion. Into their minds, he poured pride. And the giants, those mighty beings born of forbidden desire, turned on one another with a fury unmatched. One accused the other of betrayal. One envied the strength of his brother. One thirsted for the blood of another. What had been a unified reign of terror turned into civil war. Titans clashed. Mountains shook. Forests burned. The ground became a battlefield soaked in the blood of monsters. And all the while, humanity watched from the shadows. The same creatures they had once feared now destroyed themselves. The prayers of the faithful, once quiet, now grew louder. Hope flickered. The giants were not invincible. The Nephilim, in their violence, had become their own undoing. And Gabriel, unseen, passed over them like wind over fire, watching it consume itself. Back on Mount Hermon, the last of the watchers fell. Michael stood alone. The chains had been delivered. The verdict had been carried out. The mountain groaned. And then, silence. For the first time in centuries, silence. No chants. No blasphemy. No cries for more. Just the quiet aftermath of divine justice. The cursed oath had been broken. The rebellion bound. The archangels returned to heaven. Before the throne of God, they bowed. "It is done," they said. "The watchers are bound. The Nephilim are falling. The world is ready for cleansing." And the Lord looked upon the earth with eyes of fire and mercy. There was one more task. One man had been faithful. One man had walked with God even while the world sank into darkness. That man was Noah, and it was time for him to build. The flood was coming not as wrath, but as reset, not to destroy without purpose, but to cleanse so that life might begin again. And in that act, justice and mercy would meet. The story of the watchers had ended, but the story of mankind was not yet finished. There are moments in history when the sky no longer seems like just an expanse above, but a veil about to be torn open. This was one of those moments. The heavens had issued their command. The sentence was not just spoken, it was enacted. The archangels, embodiments of divine will, now moved with unrelenting purpose. The world was still, as if it held its breath. But beneath the stillness, the old mountain where the watchers first made their fateful pact, Mount Hermon, began to tremble. This sacred peak, once chosen by the rebels as a threshold between heaven and earth, now stood as the site of their reckoning. Michael, the commander of heaven's armies, stood upon its summit. The wind howled around him, but he was unmoved. His eyes, forged from light, pierced through the layers of time and betrayal. His presence alone fractured the silence. This was the mountain where 200 angels had sworn an unholy oath. Now, it would become their prison. Michael raised his hand, and the sky responded. Thunder cracked. Light split through the clouds like swords drawn from invisible sheaths. The moment of reckoning had arrived. The watchers were no longer scattered. They had gathered once more, not in triumph, but in dread. They stood together as they had the night they made their pact. But now there was no hope between them, only regret and resignation. Their wings, once white and radiant, now hung like torn banners. Their faces, once bright with the glory of the Most High, were dimmed by shame. Samyaza stood at the center, silent. He had led them into this, and now he would lead them into the abyss. The chains descended again, not as metaphor, not as vision, but as reality forged by the word of God. They were radiant, alive, coiling through the air like serpents of justice. Each chain knew its target. Each one bound not only the body, but the spirit, the memory, the oath that had broken creation's order. The watchers did not resist. There was no fight left in them. They had already lost everything that mattered. One by one, they dropped to their knees. The ground beneath them cracked. Michael did not speak out of vengeance. He spoke from truth. You who once stood beside us in the courts of heaven, who were trusted with the mysteries of creation, who walked among stars, what have you become? No. Answer came. Samyaza opened his mouth but said nothing. A single tear traced down his cheek. The others looked away. Judgment is not always loud. Sometimes it is the silence that crushes. Michael continued. You crossed the line set by the Most High. You touched what was not yours to touch. You gave to mankind what they were not ready to bear. You fathered destruction and taught rebellion. You unmade what God had made good. And now, you will return to the dust not to die. for you cannot die, but to wait. For 70 generations you will remain in darkness, and then, on the day of judgment, you will face the fire prepared from the beginning." End quote. Rated D. The mountain shuddered violently. The sky darkened as if even the sun turned its face away. And then, with a groan that echoed across the valleys, the earth opened. A deep chasm tore itself into being, a wound that reached to the heart of the world. Into this chasm the bound watchers were cast, not dropped like stones, but lowered by the very word of God. There would be no escape, no forgiveness, not in this age. They fell in silence. No screams, no curses, only acceptance. Samyaza was the last. As the ground swallowed him, he looked back at Michael. His voice, broken and hollow, whispered one final plea. "Tell him, we are sorry." Michael's gaze did not waver. "You should have been sorry before you fell." And with that, Samyaza vanished into the darkness. The chasm closed. The mountain became still. The watchers were no more. But the task was not yet finished. In the far reaches of the desert, Raphael stood over the bound form of Azil, the angel whose teachings had armed mankind with knowledge it was never meant to hold. Azil had not cried. He had not begged. But now, as the weight of judgment pressed upon him, even he began to tremble. "I gave them power," he said. "I made them strong." Raphael's reply was calm, unshaken. "You gave them destruction. You turned knowledge into poison. You taught war before they knew peace, beauty before they knew humility. You taught them to rise before they learned to kneel." That day's wrote. Azil's voice grew bitter. "And who gave those secrets to us?" Raphael's face turned to stone. "They were given with trust, with the command to guard, not to scatter." With that, Raphael raised his hand. The desert itself responded. A pit opened narrow, cruel, jagged. Into it, Azil was cast. But this was no mere hole. This was a place designed for those who had corrupted purity. As he fell, stones rained upon him, not thrown, but cold, each one sharp, each one sealing him further into darkness. The light fled from the pit, and silence returned. Across the land, giants fell. Gabriel's whispers had taken root. The Nephilim, fueled by pride and poisoned by paranoia, tore each other apart. Mountains echoed with their roars, then with their cries, then with silence. Those who had ruled like gods now bled like beasts. Their corpses covered the earth, but their spirits did not rest. They had no home in heaven, no rest in Sheol. They became the cursed spirits, the wandering demons that would haunt the sons of men for generations to come. And in the distance, beyond the blood and battle, Noah built the ark. His hammer rang through the forest like a heartbeat. Obedient, steady, faithful. He knew what was coming, though he did not yet see the rain. And somewhere in the sky, the archangels returned to heaven, their work done. The watchers were buried. The giants were dying. The earth, at last, could breathe again. But the flood had not yet begun. First, there would be silence, a silence that covered the world before the waters came to cleanse it. The earth shook not from the tread of titans, but from their fall. The Nephilim, once gods in the eyes of men, feared and worshipped, were now crumbling, not at the hands of angels, not from the blade of man, but from within. Their own pride, their own fury, turned brother against brother, monster against monster. Gabriel's whisper, a divine seed planted deep in their hearts, bloomed into suspicion, envy, and rage. The giants, birthed from rebellion, now devoured one another in a storm of vengeance and blood. It began with arguments over dominion. A single accusation became a challenge. A challenge became a duel. But giants do not fight like men. Their battles scarred the land. Mountains split, rivers changed course. Entire valleys sank under the weight of their fury. Clans of Nephilim clashed in wars so fierce that no mortal eye could fully witness them and live. Great weapons forged by their watcher fathers shattered against the bones of their kin. They wielded fire, stone, and strength no human hand could match. And yet, none prevailed for long. Pride made them blind. Rage made them weak. One by one, they fell, some torn limb from limb, others buried beneath mountains of stone, some drowned in floods they unleashed in their wrath. Their cries of pain rose like smoke, mixing with the ashes of cities they had once destroyed. Where they once ruled as kings, only silence remained. The Book of Enoch records it plainly. Let them perish by mutual slaughter. For length of days they shall not have. And so it was. Their days were numbered not by the stars, but by their sins. But their death did not bring peace. It birthed a new terror. For though their bodies perished, their spirits did not pass into rest. The Nephilim were not fully of this world. They bore the blood of angels and the flesh of humans. And when their bodies died, their souls had no place to go. They could not enter heaven, they were not holy. They could not return to dust, they were not mortal. Instead, they became what men would come to fear above all else, demons. These spirits were cursed to wander the earth. Restless, ravenous, hateful, they thirsted, but not for water. They hungered, but not for food. Their desire was for chaos, for suffering, for revenge against the world that rejected them. They moved unseen, yet their presence could be felt in madness, in violence, in whispers that drove men to slaughter and women to despair. The world had never known such evil, and now it would never be without it. They roamed the night, clinging to the shadows of the world they once ruled. They entered homes through fear, dreams through temptation, souls through weakness. They could not be touched, but they could touch everything. Their rage was eternal, fueled by the knowledge of what they had lost. The light of heaven was closed to them, and they hated mankind for being loved by the very God who had cast them out. Enoch, in his visions, saw these spirits. He saw them swarming like locusts across the world. He heard their voices mocking, accusing, deceiving. He asked the angels, "Why are they allowed to remain?" And the answer was grim. Because the judgment is not yet complete. They will remain until the final day, until all things are judged, until the last soul has made its choice. Knows, they became the silent war behind every visible one. Where there was war, they stirred it. Where there was lust, they fed it. Where there was despair, they deepened it. They were not equal to angels, but they were many, and they were persistent. Over time, humanity gave them names: unclean spirits, devils, tormentors, but their origin was forgotten. Only the pain remained. Yet even in this darkness, light flickered. The faithful were not abandoned. Those who walked with God, as Enoch did, were guarded. The demons could tempt, but they could not destroy the soul that clung to the Almighty. They could rage, but they could not touch the spirit sealed by divine truth. God did not remove them, but he restrained them. He allowed their presence not as cruelty, but as testing. For every generation, every person must choose the path of light or the whispers of shadow. The Nephilim, though gone in flesh, became the curse of every age. Their fall was not an end, but a transformation of evil, and the world would live under that shadow until the Son of Man would come to cast them out. As the last of the giants fell, the earth grew still. The angels returned to heaven, their tasks fulfilled. The sky, once stained with fire and blood, now awaited its next command. And deep in the wilderness, one man continued his work. Noah, righteous in a generation of darkness, hammered the frame of the ark. He did not speak to crowds. He did not perform miracles. He obeyed. With every plank of wood, he built salvation. With every nail, he sealed a promise. For God had told him, a flood is coming. And now, with the giants fallen and the watchers bound, the time had come. The world would be washed clean. But first, the ark had to be finished. Every beam was a testimony, every measurement a covenant. For though the earth had been defiled, God had not forsaken it. Though the demons roamed, the faithful would be saved. Judgment was certain, but so was mercy. The fall of the giants was a warning, a divine reminder that power without obedience leads only to ruin, that knowledge without reverence becomes destruction, that even the strongest fall when they rise against the will of God. And so the Nephilim became legend, their bones lost to time, their spirits cursed to wander, their story written in the stars and on the hearts of those who still remember. But their legacy would not have the final word, because something greater was coming. After the Nephilim fell, the earth breathed, but it did not rest. Though their monstrous bodies were broken, their spirits were not destroyed. In fact, something more insidious had begun. From the ruins of these giants came a new terror, one that could not be seen, touched, or slain with a sword. The spirits of the Nephilim, cursed and restless, began to wander the earth. They had no place in heaven, for they were born from rebellion. They had no place among the dead, for they were not fully human. They were caught between worlds, and in their torment, they turned on the world that had rejected them. The Book of Enoch makes this clear. These spirits were doomed to remain on earth until the final judgment. Invisible, but powerful, they did not seek homes, but victims. They were not content with shadows, they wanted influence. They whispered in the minds of kings, sowing war. They stirred the dreams of men, seeding lust and fear. They fed on suffering, on despair, on pride. Unlike their fathers, the Watchers, who had fallen by desire, these spirits fell by hatred. Their existence was pain, and so they sought to inflict pain. They became the first demons. Enoch saw them in his visions. He watched them drift like smoke across the land, passing through cities, creeping into homes, waiting at the edge of hearts that had lost their guard. They were not merely tormentors, they were deceivers. They did not roar. They whispered. They did not destroy with might, but with lies. They wore the voices of lost loved ones, the face of hidden fears, the promise of secret power. And always, they fed, not on flesh, but on the soul, the trust of a child, the hope of a widow, the prayer of a desperate man. All were their prey. These spirits carried with them the memory of the Watchers. They remembered the ancient knowledge, the forbidden arts, the ways of seduction and war. And though they had no physical bodies, they retained the cunning of their angelic bloodline. They used men and women as puppets, twisting the legacy of their fathers into new forms. False religions rose in their honor. Idols were carved in their image. Rituals were performed to gain their favor. Sacrifices, human and otherwise, were offered to these invisible lords of ruin. Their influence grew. Empires unknowingly bowed to them. Cultures absorbed their teachings under different names. These spirits did not need to be seen to be worshipped. They craved obedience, and humanity, ever hungry for shortcuts to power, gave it freely. The knowledge the Watchers once gave openly was now passed in whispers, in secret rites, in blood oaths, in dreams filled with flame. The demons shaped civilizations, not by force, but by suggestion. They learned that suggestion was far more lasting than conquest. But not all humanity yielded. There were still those who walked with God. Enoch, the prophet who had seen the heavens, warned of these spirits. He wrote, "Do not fear them. They have no power over the righteous." And it was true. While demons could torment the flesh and tempt the mind, they could not touch the soul sealed in truth. Those who trusted in the Most High became like mountains unmoved. Demons could scratch at their walls, but they could not enter. Yet, even among the faithful, the influence of these spirits was felt. They turned brother against brother. They whispered doubts into the ears of prophets. They surrounded the people of God like wolves around a flock. Enoch understood their persistence. They had been cursed to wander until the final judgment. And until that day, they would never stop seeking to devour what they could not become. They had once lived as giants. Now, they lived as ghosts. In time, the world began to forget where they came from. The story of the Nephilim faded into myth. The Watchers became legend, but the spirits remained. In every age, they adapted. In every generation, they wore new names. Baal, Molech, Asmodeus. They became demons of plague, of wrath, of lust, of deceit. And still, they whispered. Still, they stirred war and pride. Still, they waited for hearts to leave the path of light. But even as their presence spread, so did the promise of their end. In his visions, Enoch saw their final fate. He saw them gathered at the day of judgment, no longer invisible, no longer unchecked. He saw them bound by the same chains that had held the Watchers, dragged from the corners of the world, screaming in defiance. He saw them cast into the same fire, into the place prepared not just for the fallen angels, but for their cursed children as well. There, they would burn not with cleansing, but with consequence. There, they would be silenced forever. Until that day, however, they remain. The Apostle Peter would later write that the devil prowls like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. But Peter was not speaking of Satan alone. He spoke also of these ancient spirits, the spirits of the Nephilim, the ones who roam the ruins of mankind's choices, feeding on every fear, every sin, every moment of weakness. They are not myths. They are not gone. And though they cannot be seen, they can be resisted. The faithful need not fear, for while these spirits are real, so is the power that binds them. They tremble at the name of the Lord. They flee from the truth. They shatter before holiness. Enoch reminded his readers, "Call upon the Most High, and they will flee. Trust in his name, and they cannot stand against you." Mina. And so, the world entered a new phase of its long war, not against flesh and blood, but against powers unseen. The giants were dead. The Watchers were bound, but their legacy walked the earth in shadows. Yet, for every whisper of darkness, there remains a voice of light, and for every soul tempted by these spirits, there is still a choice. For the final battle had not yet come, but it was written, it was promised, and the spirits knew they would not wander forever. There comes a moment in every faithful life when the journey through this world ends. For most, it ends in death, a final breath, a returning to dust. But for Enoch, the man who walked with God through a world collapsing into corruption, the end was unlike any other. He did not die. He did not grow old or weak. He did not return to the earth. He was taken alive, whole and holy, into the very presence of God. And in that moment, heaven bore witness to the first mortal being lifted from the realm of men into the eternal realm above. Enoch had fulfilled his mission. He had seen the collapse of heaven's boundaries, the fall of the watchers, the birth and the death of giants. He had seen the corruption of men, the spread of forbidden knowledge, and the rise of demons. He had spoken with angels, recorded visions, warned his people, and prepared his family. He had lived not for comfort, not for ambition, but for obedience. Every breath he had drawn was in reverence. Every word he had spoken was weighed with purpose. And heaven, watching this life unfold in purity, could not allow it to end in death. The day of his ascension began as any other. He rose before the sun, offered prayers, and walked toward the hills. His son, Methuselah, who had grown old enough to understand what few could, watched him go with a weight in his chest. Something was different. The wind was softer. The air was clearer. The silence felt alive. Methuselah called after him, "Father, will you return?" Enoch smiled, a smile filled with peace. "If the Lord wills it," he answered, and he kept walking. Enoch climbed higher into the hills, the same path he had walked 1,000 times before. But this time, the sky shimmered with anticipation. The birds did not sing. The trees stood still. And then, the light came. It was not the light of the sun. It was not fire, nor lightning, nor any earthly brilliance. It was the light of heaven, a radiance that carried the weight of eternity. It enveloped him, but did not burn. It lifted him, but did not tear. It called him, not by force, but by love. And then the voice spoke, "Enoch." It's Prosh. It was the same voice that had guided him since youth, the same voice that had revealed the secrets of the stars, the fall of the angels, the prophecy of the flood. Now it came not to instruct, but to welcome. "Your work is complete. You have written what I commanded. You have walked in righteousness. And now I call you home." In quote. Enoch fell to his knees. "But my family," he whispered, "my children, what will they do without me?" The voice replied, "You have taught them. You have left them. My words, and through your words, I will remain with them. If you devotees." Tears filled Enoch's eyes, not of sorrow, but of joy. He knew he was ready. His hands had built no kingdom, but his heart had housed the eternal. His name would be carved in no monument, but his life was recorded in the book of heaven. He rose, and as he did, the light lifted him higher and higher, until his feet no longer touched the earth. The sky opened. The wind carried songs not heard since Eden, and Enoch was gone. Methuselah, who had climbed the hill behind him, arrived too late to see the moment itself, but he saw the light. He felt the peace that lingered, and he knew. He fell to his knees, overwhelmed. He would never see his father again in this life, but he knew Enoch had not been lost. He had been taken, not by death, but by glory. He returned to his family and told them what he had seen. He gathered the scrolls, every vision, every warning, every word Enoch had written, and he kept them safe. He taught them to his children, and his children taught them to theirs, and so the words endured. Enoch's ascension became a beacon in a darkening world. In an age of corruption, he had been a light. In a world full of fallen angels, he had walked with God. And when the flood finally came, those words he left behind would be the only light left floating on the water. The author of the letter to the Hebrews would later write, "By faith Enoch was taken so that he should not see death." And he was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. That was his legacy. Not wealth, not fame, not war, but faith. He walked with God, and God walked with him. And when the world became too dark for such a soul, God simply brought him home. What makes Enoch's story so powerful is not just his visions of angels or his knowledge of the heavens. It's that he remained faithful when no one else did. He did not build a nation. He did not call down fire. He simply obeyed. And in that obedience, he changed the course of history. Without Enoch, we would not know why the flood came. We would not know the story behind the giants. We would not understand the rise of demons. His life became the key to understanding the war between heaven and earth. Enoch did not disappear. His voice remains. His scrolls survived through the generations. They were preserved by his son, passed to Lamech, then to Noah. And when the rains came and the world was drowned, the words of Enoch floated inside the ark, carried through the flood, through the centuries, through the fires of empires, through the silence of exile, hidden, protected, remembered, though forbidden. Though rejected by councils and kings, his testimony refused to die. It lived in Ethiopia, carved into stone, inked onto parchment, sung in whispers by monks in mountain monasteries. And when the time was right, it rose again so that the world might remember what it once tried to forget. Enoch's story does not end with his ascent. It begins there, because he reminds every generation that there is another path, that one can walk with God. Even when the world walks away, that one can hear the voice of heaven in a world filled with noise, that obedience matters, that righteousness endures, that death is not the only ending. Enoch was taken, but he left behind a map, a testimony, a legacy. He walked with God, and he was not, because God took him. What Enoch saw after his ascension was not a dream, nor a vision born of imagination. It was a journey real, ordered, terrifying in its scale, glorious in its detail. Heaven did not open for him as a metaphor. It opened as a structure, to a place, a realm of layers so vast and intricate that no mortal before had ever returned to speak of it. But Enoch did not return unchanged. He was taken through the very fabric of creation, through all 10 heavens. And what he saw was not for him alone, it was for all generations. The first heaven was the lowest, closest to the earth, yet still beyond the reach of men. It was a realm of natural forces, where the storehouses of wind, snow, hail, and mist were kept. Angels stood as guardians of these gates, their movements exact, their faces unwavering. Enoch saw how storms were not random, how rain was not chance, but commanded. Every flake of snow, every gust of wind, released with purpose. Nature, it turned out, was not blind. It was obedient. In the second heaven, Enoch saw something far darker. Here, angels were imprisoned, rebellious ones, not as ancient as the Watchers, but still bound. They hung in chains, suspended in torment, awaiting judgment. Their cries echoed through the chamber, not with repentance, but with fury. This was not hell, but a prison between realms. Enoch looked upon them and understood. Not every fall was final, but every act of rebellion would meet its consequence. The third heaven held contrast. On one side, lush gardens, rivers flowing with light, trees bearing fruit eternal. Souls of the righteous rested here in joy, clothed in white, singing songs of peace. On the other side, a place of shadows. Souls in torment cried out, not for escape, but for mercy. Between them lay a vast chasm that no soul could cross. Enoch was told, "This is where the dead await judgment." Here, the destinies of the faithful and the wicked are separated by eternal decree. The fourth heaven was a place of celestial movement. Enoch beheld the sun and moon not as objects of fire and rock, but as living entities, guided by angelic forces. He saw their chariots of light, their appointed courses through the sky. He heard the harmonies sung by their keepers, songs of obedience and precision. The sun did not rise because of rotation. It rose because it was told to, and it obeyed. In the fifth heaven, Enoch saw the Grigori fallen, watchers not yet judged, still weeping for their choices. These were not the defiant ones. These were the mourners. They had sinned, but now they grieved. Their sorrow filled the air. And Enoch saw in them a reflection of lost glory. He felt no pity, only understanding. Even angels, it seemed, could be broken by regret. The sixth heaven was filled with legions of holy angels. These were the recorders, the watchers, the scribes of divine law. They wrote down every act of mankind, every word spoken, every deed done, every thought whispered in the mind. Nothing escaped them. Their scrolls were vast, alive with glowing script. Enoch realized that life on earth was not just seen, but archived. That justice would come not from guesses, but from records. Then came the seventh heaven. Here, the glory was unbearable. Choirs of angels, thousands upon thousands, stood in endless worship before a throne too bright for words. The Ancient of Days, the Almighty, sat in silence, yet all things bowed. Enoch fell to his face, unable to move, overwhelmed by majesty. No word was spoken, and yet everything was said. Holiness permeated everything. There was no death here, no pain, no deception, only light, and the truth that light reveals. The eighth and ninth heavens were places beyond comprehension, realms of mystery where the stars were governed, where cosmic order was maintained. Here, Enoch saw the secrets of time, of seasons, of heavenly calendars. He saw how the movement of constellations was not random, but precise, tied to divine rhythms. He was told that when men abandoned these rhythms, they would forget sacred time and drift. Then, Enoch was brought to the 10th heaven. Here, he stood again before the full glory of God, not as a visitor this time, but as a messenger. It was here that he was given the command, "Write what you have seen. Record it for those who will come after, for the flood is near, and men will forget. But your words will remind them." Its tomb, and so he did. The journey through the heavens revealed a truth greater than any philosophy, that creation is not chaos, but design, that everything light, time, life, death moves at the command of the Creator, and that rebellion, no matter how small, is a fracture in that design. Enoch had seen the consequence of rebellion on earth. Now he saw the structure it violated. When he returned to earth, Enoch was changed. His face shone with understanding. His eyes carried the weight of otherworldly knowledge. He spoke little, but he wrote much. His scrolls, now burning with revelation, were passed to his son, and from there to the generations who would survive the flood. The 10 heavens were not mythology. They were not symbols. They were places, realms, laws, and Enoch had walked through each of them. He had seen the throne. He had heard the voices of angels. He had recorded it all not for his glory, but for our warning. And through his testimony, heaven has not remained hidden. Enoch believed that after seeing the 10 heavens, After witnessing the hierarchy of angels and the throne of the Almighty, he had beheld the greatest wonders a man could see. But God was not finished. There was one more vision to be revealed, greater than all the rest, one that would pull back the veil not just on heaven, but on eternity itself. One night, as Enoch sat alone beneath the stars, recording what he had seen, the skies opened again, but this time, the light that descended was not blinding. It was gentle, radiant, like the morning sun after a long night of sorrow. And within that light stood a figure. He was not like the angels. He was not like the watchers. He was not even like the radiant beings who served in the highest heavens. This one was different. He stood tall, clothed in white garments that shimmered like living flame. His face shone brighter than the sun. Yet Enoch could look upon it without fear. His eyes held both power and compassion. He was human, and yet more. He was divine, and yet near. Enoch fell to his knees, trembling. "Who are you?" he asked. The figure did not speak at first. He simply gestured. And suddenly, Enoch was taken not into heaven, not into earth, but into a place beyond time. A realm where past, present, and future danced in a single eternal moment. And in that space, he saw the throne of the Ancient of Days once again. Around it stood angels, tens of thousands, burning with reverence. But now, something new. Beside the throne stood the same figure Enoch had seen, resplendent, majestic, and seated in a position of honor. Then, the voice of God thundered across the heavens. "Behold, the Son of Man." Enoch's heart pounded. He knew this was not an ordinary title. This was no poetic name. This was identity. Divine, eternal, pre-existent. He was chosen, God said, before the foundations of the world. In him dwells all righteousness. Through him the hidden things shall be revealed. By him the wicked shall be judged. And through him the righteous shall be saved. And the Khan stated, the vision unfolded, and Enoch saw things that would not happen for thousands of years. He saw the earth, not as it was in his time, but as it would become, cities filled with people who no longer remembered God, idols in every square, injustice on every throne, truth twisted into lies, and lies dressed as wisdom. He saw rulers mocking the divine, and priests chasing power. He saw the innocent crushed, the poor forgotten, and in the midst of this darkness, he saw the Son of Man descend, but he did not come in fire. Not at first. He came in flesh, born of a woman, small, vulnerably, human. Enoch was shocked. This radiant figure, this divine judge, would be born as a child, would walk among men, would eat and sleep and bleed like them. He saw him grow, heal the sick, raise the dead, speak words that pierced hearts and shook kingdoms. He saw crowds follow him, then betray him. He saw rulers spit upon him, priests condemn him, soldiers scourge him. He saw a cross, a crown of thorns, blood spilled on stone. Enoch cried out, "Why must he suffer?" And the voice of God answered, "Because mercy requires sacrifice. Justice demands a price. Sin brings death, and only one who is both God and man can overcome it. Through his suffering, the gate will open. Through his death, the curse will be broken. Through his resurrection, life will triumph." Maker, the vision shifted again. Enoch saw the tomb empty, the stone rolled away, light bursting forth. He saw the Son of Man rise, not as a ghost, but alive, glorified. Angels bowed before him. The righteous dead rose with him. Death was defeated. and heaven rejoiced. But there was more. Enoch saw the final day. The sky split. Trumpets sounded. The Son of Man descended once more, this time not in humility, but in power. His eyes were flames. His voice, like many waters. The armies of heaven followed him. Thrones toppled. Nations trembled. The books were opened. Every deed, every thought, every secret brought into light. The righteous were clothed in white. Their faces shone. They stood unafraid. And the Son of Man said to them, "Come, you who are blessed, inherit the kingdom prepared for you. But the wicked, those who mocked, who oppressed, who rejected the truth, turned away. They were cast into outer darkness, not because he hated them, but because they had chosen darkness over light. He did not condemn them. They condemned themselves. And then Enoch saw the Son of Man seated on his throne. The angels sang. The righteous wept with joy. The curse was gone. The earth was renewed. And Enoch understood this was the one. This was the figure he had seen before the flood. This was the hope he had written of. This was the judge of angels, the Redeemer of man, the Son of Man. The vision faded. Enoch found himself once more on the mountain, his face wet with tears, his hands trembling. The angel who stood beside him said, "Write this down. The generations to come must know. The Son of Man is coming, and every soul must choose." No. So Enoch wrote, "I saw the Son of Man. He was with the Ancient of Days, and to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom. All peoples, nations, and languages shall serve him. His dominion is everlasting, and those who trust in him shall not perish, but have life everlasting." It was thousands of years later, when Jesus walked the earth. He called himself by one name above all others, the Son of Man. Enoch had seen him, and now we see him too. After visions of judgment and glimpses of the Messiah, Enoch was taken into a place unlike any he had seen. It was not a throne room. It was not a battlefield of angels. It was something quieter, more mysterious, yet no less holy. This realm was the heart of order itself, a place where time was measured not by human calendars, but by divine patterns. Here, Enoch would be shown the architecture of the heavens, the true calendar, the movement of the sun, moon, stars, all not as random, celestial bodies, but as instruments in the Creator's symphony. This vision would be known as the astronomical book. His guide in this realm was Uriel, the archangel of light and wisdom. Uriel stood at the gate between time and eternity, his face calm, his eyes deep like the night sky filled with meaning. "Enoch," he said, "you have seen the fall of the watchers. You have seen the judgment of the giants. You have beheld the Son of Man. Now you will see something that most men ignore. The order behind creation, the rhythm that binds the heavens to the earth. Iswelde, before them stood gates of light, 12 in the east, 12 in the west, each perfectly aligned." Uriel explained, "These were the gates through which the sun enters and exits the sky. Not metaphor, but actual structure. The sun, Enoch saw, was no ball of fire, but a chariot of blazing light drawn by forces unseen. It entered the world through one gate, traveled its appointed path, and exited through another, each day without fail. The gates moved with the seasons. In summer, the sun passed through northern gates, and the days were long. In winter, it moved through southern gates, and the days shortened. Nothing was random. Everything obeyed. Then Enoch saw the moon cool, with silent, reflective. Unlike the sun, It waxed and waned in a precise cycle. 29.5 days. He learned that the moon marked months. The months marked seasons, and the seasons marked years. It was all part of a vast celestial mechanism, perfectly timed, utterly obedient to its creator. Uriel said, "The moon listens to the word of God. It knows its course. It does not stray. If men followed the moon rightly, they would remember sacred time, but they have forgotten. Way." Enoch was taken further into the heavens, into a chamber filled with stars. Each star moved along a fixed path, shining with purpose. Some moved quickly planets. Others turned slowly across the sky, marking times and signs. "These are the luminaries," Uriel said. "They do not exist for worship, but for witness. They declare the glory of God. They guide the traveler. They tell the seasons of the earth. But men have corrupted them, twisted them into idols, used them for sorcery, divination, vanity." Enoch stood in awe. He realized that what men called astronomy had once been sacred, a gift to understand the Creator's order, not to replace him. The stars were sermons written in light. The sun, a daily call to rise. The moon, a mirror of faithfulness in its phases. Time itself was designed to keep humanity in rhythm with heaven. The seventh day, the Sabbath, was not just a command, it was built into the design of the cosmos. Then Uriel revealed something even more startling. "The year," he said, "as ordained by God, is 364 days, not 365, as modern calendars would later claim, not based on pagan solar cycles or lunar superstitions, but a perfect structure, 52 weeks, 7 days each, all aligning with the Sabbath, a year that never shifted, never drifted, holy time, perfectly measured." Enoch recorded everything. He wrote down the names of the months, the rising and setting of each gate, the shifting of light and shadow. He charted the movement of stars, the changes of the moon, the harmony of equinoxes and solstices. This wasn't science. It was worship in motion. It was sacred geometry, divine chronology. Uriel looked into Enoch's eyes. "You must preserve this, because in time, men will forget. They will follow other calendars, ones based on conquest, on empire, on moon worship, on the cycles of gods that are no gods at all. They will forget the appointed times. They will celebrate on the wrong days. They will lose the rhythm. And when they do, they will drift from the heart of God. Revend fermented to band, and Enoch saw that it would happen. He saw priests replacing sacred days with profitable ones. He saw kings changing festivals for political gain. He saw men abandon the Creator's order for convenience. He saw the Sabbath forgotten, the feasts moved, the sacred year disfigured. And with each distortion, the people grew more distant from the God who had woven time into their very bones. But Enoch also saw something else. He saw a time far in the future when his writings would be rediscovered, when those who hungered for truth would read the astronomical book and realize what had been lost. He saw men and women realigning their lives with the true calendar, not for law's sake, but for love, a return to divine order, a remembrance of sacred time. And then Enoch understood the weight of what he had been shown. The sun, the moon, the stars. They were not just ornaments of the sky. They were keepers of covenant. Every sunrise was a reminder that the Creator is faithful. Every full moon, a sign that his cycles endure. Every change of season, a promise that the world still moves under his hand. Enoch bowed his head. He thanked Uriel, and he began to write. The astronomical Book of Enoch would become one of the most detailed records of celestial order in ancient history. It was not astrology. It was not superstition. It was revelation. It was the voice of heaven, engraved in light, calling men to remember, to return, to realign. For in forgetting sacred time, humanity forgets its place. But in restoring it, we remember who we are. Dust, yes, but dust that moves in the rhythm of stars, created for communion with the one who measures even time with love. One night, after Enoch had recorded the heavenly calendar, after he had mapped the stars and measured the gates of light, a different kind of revelation came upon him. This was not a journey through the heavens or a voice from an angel. It was a dream yet unlike any dream a man had ever experienced. It came not with confusion or fading symbols, but with clarity and power. In it, Enoch was shown the entire history of the world, from the Garden of Eden to the final judgment, but not as a list of events. Instead, he saw it as a vision of animals, a living parable where each creature represented a nation, a people, a prophet, or a king. He saw a white bull standing alone in a vast green field. It was strong, nobler, innocent. This was Adam, the first man, created in purity and placed in a world of life. Then from the white bull came a heifer, Eve. They stood side by side, peaceful, whole. Around them, the garden bloomed in radiant color. Rivers sparkled. Trees bore fruit in abundance, and the presence of God rested upon the land. But then a shadow slithered into the scene, a dark serpent, coiling, whispering. It deceived the heifer, and soon the bull followed. They ate what was forbidden. The light faded, and they were cast out of the field. From them came two calves, one white, one red, Abel and Cain. The red calf struck the white and killed it. Blood spilled onto the ground. The red calf was cursed, marked, and driven into the wilderness. And from Adam came another line, a white calf named Seth. From Seth descended more white cattlemen who walked with God: Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared. Then came a figure Enoch recognized himself, a white bull among the others, set apart, receiving light from above. But then the stars began to fall. Enoch saw angels, represented as bright stars, descend from heaven. They took wives from among the cattle, and from these unions came strange creatures: elephants, camels, donkeys, giants, the Nephilim. They trampled the fields. They consumed everything in sight. The white cattle cried out, scattered, hiding in caves. But the destruction only grew. The fallen stars taught the animals dark arts. They showed them how to fight, how to manipulate, how to destroy. The world became chaos. Then 4 great figures descended from heaven, angels of light. Enoch recognized them: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel. They began to act. One bound the fallen stars. Another turned the monstrous animals against one another. A third whispered to a single white bull, one who stood apart, faithful, listening. This was Noah. Enoch saw Noah build a great wooden vessel. The sky darkened. Rain fell in torrents. The earth split open. Water rose from the deep. Every animal that walked the land perished, except for those in the vessel. When the flood receded, the ark rested on a mountain. A new beginning had arrived. From Noah came 3 bulls: Shem, Maker, Ham, Japheth. They spread across the earth. Some of their children remained white, faithful. Others turned red, black, spotted. Nations began to rise. Enoch watched the spread of humanity with sorrow. Many forgot God. They turned to idols, to pride, to war. But among the chaos, one white bull stood apart. Abraham. Enoch saw him leave his homeland, led by a divine call. From Abraham came Isaac, then Jacob. From Jacob came 12 bulls, the tribes of Israel. The tribes multiplied. Enoch saw them go down into Egypt, symbolized by dark beasts, dogs, wolves. There, they were enslaved, beaten, burdened. Their cries rose to heaven. Then a single white bull arose. Moses. He stood before the beasts of Egypt, called down plagues, and led the cattle through a parted sea. Behind them, the water closed over their enemies. The white cattle wandered in the wilderness. They received the law. They built a tent for the Lord's presence. But even there, some turned back to idols. Time passed. Enoch saw the rise of judges, then kings. He saw a great white bull crowned and seated on a throne, David. He saw a house built of stone and gold, Solomon's temple. The glory of the Lord filled it. For a while, peace reigned, but the cattle grew proud. The nation split 10 tribes to the north, 2 to the south. The northern tribes turned black, mingling with spotted herds. The Assyrians came wild beasts that devoured. The northern tribes vanished. Then the southern kingdom fell into sin. Lions, wolves, and eagles descended Babylon. The city was burned, the temple destroyed. The white cattle were taken in chains. But even in exile, a remnant remained faithful. They prayed, they remembered, they returned. The temple was rebuilt, the walls restored, but the hearts of the cattle remained divided. Some sought the Lord, others sought power, and Enoch wept. Then came a moment unlike any before. A new figure appeared, not a bull, but a lamb, small, gentle, shining with light. Enoch watched as the lamb walked among the cattle, healing their wounds, leading them gently. But the beasts grew angry. They captured the lamb. They killed it. Blood poured from its side. For a moment, the world went dark, but then the lamb stood again alive, and behind him rose many more white lambs. Light spread across the field. Enoch saw the end approaching. Thrones descended from the sky. The Lord of the sheep sat upon his seat of judgment. The wild beasts were gathered: Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, all represented by terrifying animals. They were judged, cast into a burning abyss. The white cattle were transformed. Their flesh became light. They stood tall, clothed in glory. The earth was renewed. A great house descended from the sky, a golden city. Rivers flowed from its center. Trees of life grew along the banks. There was no more death, no more pain, only peace, only joy. Enoch awoke, trembling, his face wet with tears. He reached for his scroll and wrote it all down. He understood. History was not a cycle of chaos, but a story written by God. Every generation had its moment of choice. Every nation had its reckoning. And in the end, it would not be the strong who prevailed, but the faithful. The dream was not just a vision of the past. It was a prophecy of the future, a message in symbols, a roadmap in animals, a warning, a promise. And through it, Enoch left behind one of the most mysterious and powerful revelations in all ancient scripture. Hello, YouTube team. I'm Tien, the owner of the YouTube channel Midnight History. Today, at 2:21 a.m., I received an email notifying me that my YouTube channel has been demonetized due to dishonest content. I am very sad and shocked, because I feel my channel has been unfairly and biasedly judged. I sincerely hope the YouTube team will review and reevaluate my channel in detail. My channel revolves around stories about mysterious royal bloodlines, such as Merovingian, Knights Templar, and Christianity. These are all real historical events, with accurate historical facts, such as the existence of the Knights Templar, 1119-1312, and the real Merovingian dynasty, 5th, 8th, helping viewers visualize and question history. All videos are individually written, edited, and produced by me. Scripts are not reused or mass-produced. AI tools only assist drafting. Final structure and review are my own. I respect YouTube's policies and strive to create original, educational, and honest content. Enoch's dream had revealed to him the entire arc of history, from the creation of Adam to the rise and fall of kingdoms. But at the center of this vast unfolding story stood one figure above all others: the Lamb. Not a beast of war or terror, not a towering king or winged angel, but a humble, radiant lamb. He was gentle, he was pure, and yet the power within him surpassed every throne, every empire, every star in the heavens. This lamb would not merely appear in the dream as a symbol. He would become the central character in all of creation's redemption. In the vision, Enoch saw the lamb walking among the scattered white cattle humanity, calling to them, healing their wounds, guiding them back from the edge of destruction. The beasts of the world, representing kingdoms and false religions, snarled at him, but he did not strike them down. He did not raise a sword. He did not summon fire. Instead, he loved, he taught, he laid hands on the broken and restored them. And the people followed, some with joy, others with suspicion. Then Enoch saw something that made the very ground beneath him tremble. The lamb, innocent and spotless, was seized, not by wild beasts, but by his own, those he came to save. The white cattle turned against him. They shouted, they cursed, and they handed him over to wolves and vultures, enemies cloaked in power and law. They beat him, mocked him, spit upon him, and then they led him to a hill. Enoch saw them raise him on a wooden beam. Nails pierced his limbs. Blood poured from his side. The sky turned dark. The stars withdrew their light. The earth shook as if it could not bear the weight of this moment. Enoch wept. Why? He cried in the vision. Makamanaz 1:18. Why must the lamb die? And then came the answer, not from an angel, but from the voice of the Most High. Because justice requires sacrifice, because love cannot redeem from a distance, the curse must be broken, not by power, but by surrender. The blood of the innocent will speak louder than the blood of Abel. Through this death, the door to life will open. Zem, the lamb died. The world fell silent, but it was not the end. Enoch watched as the stone was rolled away. The tomb was empty. The lamb rose not in secrecy, but in light. He stood radiant, more glorious than before. Death had no hold on him. The curse had been broken from the inside out. Chains fell from souls long bound. Darkness fled before his face, and everywhere he went, new life followed. Enoch saw him ascend to the throne beside the Ancient of Days. All of heaven erupted in song. The angels bowed, not with fear, but with joy. The Lamb had conquered by being slain. He had won through weakness. He had triumphed through humility. And because of that, all authority in heaven and on earth was given to him. But the vision did not end there. Enoch was shown the distant future, the time of the final reckoning. Once more, the Lamb would descend, but not as before. This time, he came as a king, a judge, a warrior of light. His eyes blazed like fire. His voice shook the heavens. And behind him came the armies of holiness, 10,000 times 10,000, clothed in white. The trumpet sounded. The skies split. And all creation stood before his throne. The books were opened. Every soul was brought forward. The Lamb did not need to accuse. His presence alone revealed all things. The righteous, those who had trusted in him, who had walked in humility, who had chosen the path of light, were welcomed. "Enter," he said. "Well done. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you. Is peace." They wept with joy. They were clothed in garments of light. Their scars vanished. Their sorrow melted. They entered into a city where there was no more death, no more pain, no more tears, but others stood trembling. These were the ones who rejected him, who scorned the truth, who lived for themselves, who trampled the innocent. They had seen the light and turned away. And now their deeds followed them, not because the Lamb desired their destruction, but because they had refused his invitation. With sorrow, he said, "Depart. You chose darkness. You loved the lie. You hardened your heart." And they were cast into the place of separation, a fire not fueled by vengeance, but by the absence of God's presence. Their cries were not of punishment alone, but of unbearable regret. Then Enoch saw the Lamb raise his hands. The heavens and the earth were remade. The old world passed away like smoke. A new world appeared, gleaming like gold, fresh like Eden. Trees lined rivers of light. The sky no longer held a sun, for the Lamb himself was its light. Nations gathered without borders. People walked without fear. Joy was endless. And at the center of it all sat the Lamb, no longer slain, but enthroned forever. Enoch fell to his knees. The vision faded. He awoke on the mountain, face wet with tears, heart burning. The angel beside him said, "Write it all, for this is the hope of all creation. The Lamb is coming, and every soul must decide." My mentioning, Enoch wrote, "I saw the Lamb. I saw his suffering. I saw his glory. And I saw that all judgment was given to him. The righteous will rejoice in his presence. The wicked will flee from his face. Blessed are those who trust in him, for they will inherit eternal life." His world, that vision, written thousands of years before Christ, remains one of the clearest prophecies of the Messiah in all ancient writings. When Jesus came and called himself the Son of Man, he wasn't borrowing a phrase. He was fulfilling a vision given to Enoch, the man who walked with God. And now, through his words, we are invited to walk with the Lamb. 2. After visions of the heavens, after the dream of beasts and the coming of the Lamb, Enoch received one final message. This time, it did not come in fire or thunder, not through the unfolding of cosmic scenes or angelic voices. It came in stillness, a letter, a word spoken to the generations yet unborn, a final testimony from a man who had seen the beginning and the end. This message would become known as the Epistle of Enoch, a prophetic letter not written to kings or priests, but to all who would live in the ages to come. "Write," the voice said, "for time itself has a shape, and those who live within it must understand the story they belong to." And so, Enoch wrote not in symbols, not in animals or stars, but in truth, as clear as stone. He divided history into 10 weeks, 10 great epochs of the world, each week marked by a turning point, a sacred pattern, a moment when heaven would act decisively in the story of mankind. The first week, Enoch wrote, was the week of beginnings. In this age, Adam was created, the garden was planted, and righteousness still dwelled among men. The fall had come. Yes, but the memory of Eden remained fresh. Men still called upon the name of the Lord. This was the age of innocence, touched by sorrow, of promise remembered. In the second week came the first great crisis. Darkness spread. The watchers descended. Giants were born, and the world was drowned in wickedness. But one man, Noah, was found faithful, and through the ark, life was preserved. The flood came not to erase, but to cleanse, a divine reset. The week ended in water, but also in covenant. The third week brought the calling of Abraham. From among the nations, one man heard the voice of God and obeyed. A people were chosen, not for privilege, but for purpose. Through them, the promise of redemption would be kept alive. They would wander, they would struggle, but they would carry the light. In the fourth week, the law was given. Moses led the people out of bondage. Mount Sinai burned with the fire of holiness. The voice of God thundered. Commandments were carved in stone. A tabernacle was built, and the presence of God came to dwell among his people. This was the week of revelation, of structure, of holy discipline. The fifth week saw the rise of a house of glory. The Temple of Solomon stood in splendor, filled with gold and light and song. The kingdom was united. Peace flowed like a river. But beneath the surface, pride stirred. Idolatry crept in. And though the glory remained, cracks had begun to form. The sixth week was the week of scattering. The temple burned. The people were taken into exile. Babylon rose with iron chains and flaming swords. The land of promise became a land of mourning. Yet even in captivity, prophets spoke. Hope was not lost. A remnant remained. A promise still flickered in the dark. In the seventh week, the exiles returned. A second temple was built, not as glorious, but no less sacred. Walls were restored. Worship resumed. But the hearts of the people were divided. Some loved God. Others loved power. Even among the priests, corruption grew. The week ended with waiting, with the sense that something greater must come. Then came the eighth week, the week of righteousness. In this time, the chosen one would be revealed. The Son of Man would walk the earth. Righteousness would be planted, not on tablets, but in hearts. The Lamb would suffer. The gospel would spread. The weak would be lifted. The humble would be exalted. And the faithful would inherit eternal glory. In the ninth week, judgment would begin. The works of the wicked would be exposed. The idols of the nations would fall. The earth would be marked for destruction, not out of cruelty, but to prepare for renewal. The righteous would shine. The knowledge of the Lord would cover the earth like water covers the sea. And in the 10th and final week, the end would come. The watchers would be judged. The cursed spirits would be cast down. The first heaven would pass away, and a new heaven would appear. God himself would dwell among men. The world would be reborn. Death would be no more. Tears would be wiped away. Eternity would begin. Enoch's hand trembled as he wrote, not out of fear, but out of awe. He had seen it all. The pattern was not hidden. Time was not a series of accidents. It was a design, a sacred tapestry being woven by unseen hands. Each thread mattered. Each moment carried weight. But the epistle did not end with prophecy. It ended with instruction. My children, Enoch wrote, do not follow the path of the wicked. Do not chase gold and forget the poor. Do not worship idols made by your own hands. Do not harden your hearts when the truth comes near, for the days are numbered, and the books are being written. He warned of false teachers who would rise, of those who would claim to speak for God while chasing their own gain, of those who would twist grace into license and truth into chains. Woe to those, he wrote, who build palaces from injustice. Woe to those who mock the righteous and honor the corrupt, for their end is sealed, and their wealth will burn like straw. Meat, but then came a blessing. Blessed are those who walk in truth. Blessed are those who feed the hungry, shelter the stranger, honor the name of the Most High. Their reward is not silver, but glory. Their inheritance is not land, but life everlasting. And near the end, Enoch passed the scroll to his son Methuselah. Guard this, he said. Teach it to your children, for the day will come when the world forgets. But these words must remain. They are not mine. They belong to the Lord. Rating, my Nina. Methuselah wept. Where will you go? Enoch smiled. I go to walk with the one I have always followed. Do not mourn. Rejoice, for I will see him face to face. Gaiman. Prodento. And so Enoch's epistle came to a close, not with finality, but with invitation, a letter sent across time, a map drawn in hope, a voice calling from the edge of eternity to every soul who still listens. There is a day appointed that no soul can escape, not the righteous, not the wicked, not kings, nor servants, a day when time stops and eternity begins, when every secret is unveiled, every hidden thought brought into the light. This is the day of judgment, the final reckoning, the moment that Enoch had seen from the beginning, not in vague symbols or veiled warnings, but with piercing clarity. He saw the heavens torn open, he saw the throne established, and he saw every soul, from the first to the last, called forth to stand before the face of the Most High. It began in stillness, a silence unlike any Enoch had ever felt. Then the stars were peeled back like a curtain, and the light behind them burned with indescribable brilliance. The throne of God appeared, not built of stone or gold, but of light and justice and holiness itself. Around it stood the hosts of heaven, angels without number, radiant and silent. And beside the throne, as always, stood the Son of Man. Enoch watched as the earth beneath him dissolved. Mountains melted, seas fled, cities vanished, and all that remained were people, countless multitudes gathered in awe and terror. Some stood tall, shining with peace. Others trembled, their faces pale, their knees buckling beneath the weight of their own conscience. None could hide, none could run. Then the books were opened, not scrolls of paper or volumes bound by hand, but living records, books of light, of memory, of perfect truth. In them was written every word ever spoken, every act ever committed, every thought whispered in the dark. Nothing was missing, nothing was distorted. There were no excuses, no loopholes. Each soul saw their own life reflected back to them with complete clarity. The Son of Man rose. His presence silenced all noise. His gaze pierced through flesh and soul. Yet in him was no hatred, only justice, and mercy offered to those who had received it. He turned to the righteous first. Come, he said, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Writings, the righteous wept not with sorrow, but with overwhelming joy. They remembered their weakness, their struggles, their failures, but they also remembered their faith, their repentance, their clinging to the truth when it cost them everything. And now they were clothed in white robes, not earned, but given, not of their making, but of grace. Their names were found in the book of life. And then the Lamb turned to the others. These were the souls who had rejected him, ignored him, mocked his ways. They had lived for themselves. They had oppressed the poor, exploited the weak, hardened their hearts against compassion. They had worshipped idols made of gold and silver, or of their own desires. They had seen the light and turned away. To them, the Son of Man said, "Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. You refused truth. You embraced the lie. You served yourself and trampled the innocent. Now your judgment is upon you." Mation, cold. And Enoch saw the angels gather them not in vengeance, but in sorrow. They were cast into the place prepared for rebellion, not made for men, but for the watchers, for the spirits who had corrupted the world from the beginning. This place was fire, but not fire that consumes, fire that reveals, fire that reflects their choices, their regrets. Their pride turned to ash. They screamed not just from pain, but from the unbearable weight of knowing they had been given every chance and refused them all. Yet Enoch understood. This was not cruelty. This was justice. A God who does not judge evil is not holy. A love that never corrects is not love at all. The wicked were not surprised by their fate. They had known. Deep down, they had always known. And now the final moment had come. Then Enoch saw a final transformation. The heavens above and the earth below were remade. The old world passed away like smoke carried on the wind. And from the throne, God spoke, "Behold, I make all things new. Zeven, a new heaven, a new earth. No more war, no more curse, no more death." The sea was gone. The night was gone. The temple was gone, because God himself would dwell with his people. Enoch saw the new Jerusalem, a city of pure gold, descend like a bride from heaven. Its gates never closed. Its walls were transparent like crystal, and at its center was the Lamb, the light by which all would walk. Rivers flowed from his throne, clear as crystal. Trees of life lined the banks, bearing fruit each month. Their leaves were for the healing of nations. And the people redeemed, transformed, walked in peace, in joy, in eternal communion. They sang songs that no man had heard before. They embraced loved ones once lost, and they looked into the face of God without fear. There was no sun, no moon, for the presence of the Lord was the light of the world. And never again would there be sorrow. Never again would there be crying. The former things had passed away. All had been fulfilled. Enoch stood in silence, watching the completion of the story. He had seen rebellion. He had seen redemption. He had seen the rise and fall of angels and men. And now he saw the purpose for it all. And he wrote, "This is the final judgment. The throne is established. The books are opened. The wicked are cast down. The righteous are lifted up. And the world is made new. Fear the Lord, all nations. Serve him with gladness, for he is faithful, and his justice is true." Well, good job. And in that final sentence, the story found its end and its beginning. What Enoch saw next was not a continuation of judgment, but a vision of restoration so beautiful, so vast, that words strained to capture it. After the last soul had stood before the throne, after the wicked were cast away and the righteous welcomed into eternal light, the story did not stop. It was then that the Lord spoke again, not in thunder, but in calm finality. "Behold, I make all things new." And with those words, creation itself began to change. The sky above was rolled up like a scroll. The stars fell like ripe fruit from the heavens. Mountains crumbled into dust. Oceans boiled away, their depths no longer needed. The old earth, scarred by blood and war, was undone not with rage, but with purpose. It was not destruction. It was rebirth, like a seed falling to the ground, only to rise again in glory. What Enoch saw emerge was not merely different, it was perfect. A new heaven, a new earth, a new creation untouched by the curse. He saw a city descending from above, shining with the brilliance of eternity. The New Jerusalem, not built by human hands, not the product of politics or war, but crafted by God himself. Its walls were of precious stones, jasper, sapphire, emerald, topaz, each glowing with light that did not fade. The streets were pure gold, yet transparent as glass, reflecting the glory of the one who dwelt there. Gates of pearl stood open at all times, never closed, for there was no night, no danger, no fear. This city was not just a place, it was the heart of the new world. At its center stood no temple, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb were its temple. Their presence filled every corner, every street, every breath. Enoch saw people, multitudes beyond counting, from every tribe, tongue, and nation. No divisions, no hatred, no sorrow. They walked in peace, in perfect unity. They sang songs not heard since the stars were first placed in the sky. A river flowed from the throne of God, clear as crystal. It wound through the city, bringing life wherever it touched. Along its banks grew the tree of life, not one, but many, its roots deep, its branches wide, its fruit abundant. Every month it bore new fruit, and its leaves were for the healing of nations. Enoch understood. What was once lost in Eden had now been restored and surpassed. This was not a return to the beginning. It was a fulfillment of the original promise. And the people, those who had endured, who had remained faithful, who had trusted the unseen, now saw the face of God. Not through a veil, not through fear, but face to face. They bore his name on their foreheads. His presence lit their souls. There was no need for sun or moon. The Lamb was their light, and they would reign with him forever. There was no more death, no mourning, no crying, no pain. The former things had passed away, like a shadow banished by dawn. The memories of sorrow were not erased, but transformed. What had once brought weeping now brought understanding, purpose, peace. The trials of the world became the testimony of glory. The scars became beauty. Enoch saw the fulfillment of every promise, every word spoken by prophets, every longing of the faithful. He saw the place prepared for those who had walked with God, as he had walked, a home where no one was forgotten, where no tear was wasted, where every act of kindness echoed into eternity. He saw the redeemed laughing, embracing, resting in gardens that never withered. He saw children playing in fields of light, elders seated in honor, angels walking beside mortals, no longer distant or hidden. The distance between heaven and earth was gone. The two had become one. Enoch's heart swelled, not with pride, but with joy beyond words. This was why he had written. This was why he had obeyed, so that the world would know that this ending was possible, that behind all the chaos and judgment and mystery, there was always a destination, always a home. He remembered the scrolls he had given to Methuselah, the warnings, the dreams, the messages for those who would survive the flood, and he saw now that they had not been in vain. The words had endured, the faithful had endured, and now the reward was no longer a promise, it was reality. He turned to the angel beside him. "Is this truly the end?" The angel smiled. "No, Enoch, this is the beginning. This." And Enoch understood. Eternity was not a place of stillness. It was a place of life, of growth, of endless discovery of God's love, a world with no decay, a joy that deepens, not fades, a glory that only increases. The new heaven and new earth were not made just to replace the old. They were made to fulfill what the old had only foreshadowed, to dwell with God not as servants, but as sons and daughters. to walk with him, not in fear, but in delight, forever. Enoch bowed his head. He whispered a final prayer not for himself, but for those who would read his words in generations far beyond his own. Let them see what I have seen. Let them believe. Let them walk with you, Lord, until the day you make all things new. It state. And with that, the vision faded, but the promise remained. In the ages that followed Enoch's ascent, kingdoms rose and fell. Empires carved their names into stone, only to be forgotten by sand. Laws were written, temples built, scrolls preserved and lost. But the voice of Enoch, the one who walked with God, the one who saw the end before the beginning, never truly vanished. His words, buried beneath centuries of silence, continued to breathe in hidden corners of the world. The Book of Enoch, though forbidden by many, never disappeared, because truth, once spoken, cannot be undone. For 15 centuries, the book remained in obscurity. The early church fathers knew of it. They quoted it, revered it. But then, without warning, it was struck from canon. Councils met, decisions were made, and the Book of Enoch was labeled heresy, myth, fiction, too strange, too powerful, too uncomfortable. It was sealed away not because it was false, but because it revealed too much. Still, it survived. In the highlands of Ethiopia, among monks who prayed by candlelight and carved hymns into stone, the book was guarded, passed down in the ancient Ge'ez language, its pages worn by time, its truths preserved in faith. While the Western world forgot, Ethiopia remembered. While seminaries debated, shepherds sang its verses. While libraries turned their backs, the mountain kept it safe. And then, in the late 19th century, it resurfaced. A Scottish traveller, James Bruce, returned from Ethiopia with manuscripts under his arm and awe in his heart. Scholars read the pages and were stunned. Here was a vision older than Moses, more detailed than Daniel, more prophetic than any apocryphal text. It told of angels, giants, heavenly realms, divine calendars, and a Son of Man long before the Gospels were written. The book had waited. Enoch's words spoke with fresh urgency, the corruption of the watchers, the seduction of knowledge without wisdom, the rise of the Nephilim, the chains of judgment, the fire to come, and above all, the mercy extended to those who walk in righteousness. His voice echoed across time like a trumpet, sounding not just to the past, but to our present. Enoch was not merely telling stories. He was warning the world, and today, his warnings have never felt more relevant. For we live in a time when knowledge is abundant, but wisdom is rare. When the line between human and divine is challenged again, when technology offers godlike power without godly restraint, when vanity is worshipped and truth is sacrificed on the altar of convenience, when sorcery wears new clothes and the watcher's whispers echo in glowing screens, Enoch saw it all, and he wrote, not to condemn, but to call the righteous to endure, to call the broken to return, to call the sleeping to wake. He reminded us that the war is real, that it began in the heavens but now rages in hearts, that unseen spirits still stir rebellion, that the giants of the past cast long shadows into our present, that evil wears many masks, but the outcome remains the same. Yet he also showed us the end. He saw the throne, the Lamb, the judgment, the restoration. He saw that the story is not hopeless, that mercy still flows, that the righteous are not forgotten, that heaven is not far, but near, closer than we dare imagine. He wrote, again and again, that those who walk in truth will shine like the stars, that the Son of Man will not forget his own, that, Even in the darkest age, light cannot be overcome. Enoch's life stands as a testimony to this truth. You do not need to be mighty to change the world. You only need to walk with God. You need not call down fire or rule nations. You only need to listen, obey, endure. The world mocked him. The fallen feared him, but heaven took him. And now, his words return ancient. Yes, but alive. For every generation that wonders where the battle began, where the darkness came from, why the world trembles, and whether hope remains, Enoch answers. His book, once buried, now rises, not to entertain, to awaken, and now it is in your hands. What will you do with it? Will you remember the warnings? Will you seek the one who walks with those who are faithful? Will you rise in the face of darkness? Not with pride, but with light? Because the story is not over. You are still living in the middle of the book. The final chapter has been written, but the ink has not dried on your page. Enoch has spoken. The Lamb has come. The throne awaits. The Spirit still calls. Walk with God, and you, too, may be taken.